I told my son. "I thought your wedding was tomorrow." He looked at me and said, "It was last week." I was so shocked I could not speak. That moment is where everything began to split open. My name is Holland Avery. I am 67. I had spent the early morning folding the soft blue dress I planned to wear, smoothing the sleeves the way I used to smooth my son's shirts before school. I tried not to fuss too much, but I felt that quiet flutter in my chest, the kind a mother carries when her child is stepping into a new life. I had already set my overnight bag by the door, thinking I might drive to the lake house after the ceremony and let the calm water settle whatever emotions the day brought. So when I stopped by his apartment with a small box of keepsakes I thought he might want, my voice sounded light, almost playful, as I said, "I cannot wait for your wedding tomorrow." He did not smile. He did not blink. "Mom," he said. It was last week. At first I was certain I misheard him. The world around me thinned, like sound had been pulled out of the room. His face was so still, so matter-of-fact, that my mind stalled before it could catch up. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no sound came out. My throat closed around the truth before I could form it. He shifted his weight, already impatient, already preparing to leave the conversation behind. And in that small pause, I felt something inside me sink, heavy and cold, as if a floor I had trusted for decades had quietly given way. I left his apartment without remembering the walk to my car. The dress, the box, the overnight bag waiting by my door, every bit of preparation dissolved into a dull ache that settled beneath my ribs. By the time I reached home, one thought had begun to form. Shaky but undeniable, this was not a misunderstanding. It was something much deeper, and it was only beginning. I sat on the edge of my bed with my hands still trembling from the conversation. My phone was on the nightstand. Screen dark, as if it already knew what waited inside it. I told myself I didn't need to look. I told myself knowing more would only make the sting sharper. But some part of me needed proof, something undeniable, something that would make sense of the hollow feeling spreading through my chest. I opened the social media app. The first image hit like a slap. My son stood under a string of warm lights, holding his bride's hands. Her dress was simple, elegant, exactly the style she'd always said she wanted. His smile was wide, relaxed, the kind he hadn't worn around me in years. Guests stood behind them, faces I recognized. Neighbors, old friends, co-workers of his. Even his father was there, a man who'd drifted out of our lives decades ago, now seated proudly in the front row. My name wasn't tagged. My face wasn't anywhere. My existence had been edited out cleanly, like I was a mistake the photographer corrected. More photos loaded group shots. Toasts, the first dance, people laughing, touching his shoulders, embracing him. And then a video, my son lifting his bride as the crowd cheered. I pressed the volume down instinctively, the noise too bright, too far from the ache inside me. My phone buzzed. A message from an old coworker arrived just as I scrolled through the photos. I didn't respond. Beautiful wedding. You must be over the moon. I stared at the words until they blurred. My throat tightened. I typed nothing back. A sharp breath escaped me, the kind that feels almost like a warning. The photos weren't just proof that I'd been excluded. They were a map of a life he'd built without leaving space for me at all. Humiliation settled first, hot and sharp. But beneath it, something steadier began to rise, an understanding I hadn't been ready to face until now. I called him that evening, my pulse thudding in my ears. He picked up on the third ring, his voice flat, as if he'd been expecting this. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why wasn't I there?" He sighed, long and tired. "Mom, please don't start." "Start what?" My voice cracked. "Asking why my only child got married without me?" "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. "We wanted something small. Simple. No stress. I wouldn't have caused stress. I whispered. You always say that, he muttered. But you get emotional. You overreact. We just wanted the day to feel calm. I held the phone tighter. You told your father, you told neighbors, you told people who barely know you, but not me. That was different. How? He paused, and for a moment I heard nothing but his breath. Mom, I didn't mean to exclude you. I thought it would just make things simpler. A quiet anger flickered through the hurt. So the answer was to leave me out. He didn't reply. I saw the pictures. I said softly, You looked happy. He exhaled sharply. See, this is why. You're taking everything so personally. The line between us felt thin, stretched too far. I lowered my voice. I just wanted to understand. Well, he said, tired again. There's nothing to understand. After the call ended, I sat in the quiet and felt something old turning inside me, like a drawer I hadn't opened in years. His words, you make things heavier than they need to be kept circling back. Not because they were true, but because they sounded so practiced. I thought about all the times I covered his rent, medical bills, and car troubles, moments I'd tried not to count, but that had built a pattern over the years. I thought about the night he called from college, panicked because he was short on rent. I sent $200 without hesitation and never mentioned the overdue medical bill I'd been avoiding. I thought about the used car he wanted at 21, the one he couldn't afford. He needed a cosigner. His father wouldn't even meet him for coffee. I spent 3 hours at the dealership reading papers I barely understood, trusting the salesman when he said it was standard. When the engine failed a year later, I paid for the repair. He promised he'd pay me back. He never did, and I never pressed him. There were other moments too, smaller ones, but they stacked up rides to interviews, covering overdraft fees, walking him through breakups, cleaning his apartment when he was overwhelmed. I told myself it was what mothers did. I told myself raising him alone meant I had to give him a softer landing, but somewhere along the way, softness had turned into erasure. A memory surfaced him at 16, shouting that I cared too much. Me apologizing for caring. That imbalance had been living between us for a long time, quiet but steady, shaping the way he spoke to me as an adult. I rubbed my palms together, trying to ground myself. I wasn't innocent in this pattern. I'd taught him I would absorb anything, that I would bend instead of break, that I would show up even when he didn't ask, even when he didn't want me there. Maybe he'd stopped seeing the difference between love and convenience. Maybe I had too. My chest tightened, not with grief this time, but with a different kind of knowing. The morning after our conversation, I decided to take a short retreat to the lake, needing space to think. I needed space. Something steadier than the four walls that still echoed with his voice. The drive to American Lake had always been my way of catching my breath. Even back when I first bought the house after the divorce, I told myself it was a practical purchase, that it would be a place to rest between long shifts. But the truth was simpler. I needed somewhere that belonged to me. When I unlocked the front door, the familiar click settled something in my chest. I set my bag on the chair and let the silence wrap around me. Silence had never felt cruel here. It felt honest. I sank onto the old sofa, elbows on my knees. My phone buzzed once. A message from him. Mom, can we talk later? You got too emotional yesterday. I read it twice. My jaw tightened. I typed back, I need some time. Then I set the phone face down. A soft knock sounded from outside. I startled, but it was only Marcy, my neighbor, holding a small container of muffins. She'd lived next door since I bought the place, and always seemed to appear when I was unraveling. You're here early, she said gently. Everything all right? I forced a thin smile. Just needed a break. She studied me a moment, then nodded. If you need company, I'm right next door. Thank you, I whispered. When she left, the house felt even quieter, as if waiting for me to stop pretending. I walked into the small kitchen. Running my hand along the counter, I refinished myself 12 years ago. Every corner held a memory of effort, of choosing myself for once. I stood there for a long time, letting the quiet press against me. Not harshly, but with a strange kind of insistence. Something in me understood that I hadn't come here to hide. I had come here because the truth had been circling me for years, and there was nowhere left to dodge it. By late afternoon, the quiet felt heavier, as if the walls were waiting for me to stop circling the same thoughts. I pulled the old storage box from the bottom cabinet, the one where I kept every receipt, tax form, and contract related to the lake house. I told myself I was only going to sort it, maybe tidy up what I'd ignored for years. But the moment I lifted the lid, I knew I was looking for something deeper. I spread the papers across the dining table. The edges curled from age, ink fading on a few pages. But the story they told was painfully clear. Property taxes. I'd paid every one for more than 2 decades. Storm repairs after the wind tore the gutter loose. The plumbing bill from the year the pipes froze. The contractor invoice when the dock cracked and needed reinforcement. I whispered to myself, almost surprised. I covered all of this. My son had once promised to help with one repair, the roof patch job that cost nearly $2,000. He'd said, "I'll pay you back when I can, Mom." I found the receipt tucked into a folder with my handwriting across the top. Paid in full by Holland. There was no note from him, no repayment, no mention ever again. A vibration came from my phone. Another message from him. "I didn't mean to upset you. You're taking it the wrong way." I turned the phone off. As I kept reading, I found bank statements showing transfers I'd almost forgotten about. I found old bank statements covering small payments, late fees, utility bills, car registration that I had quietly managed over the years, $200 to cover a credit card fee just until payday. I never asked where his payday went after that. Marcy peeked through the back door window, her expression soft. "You need anything?" she asked when I opened the door. "No," I said quietly. "I think I just need to see things clearly." She nodded, understanding more than I said, and walked away. I returned to the table, to the clutter that suddenly looked like evidence. Years of small rescues, years of smoothing over the rough edges of his life with my own exhaustion. I'd told myself it was love. Maybe it had been. But as I stared at the papers, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. This wasn't just generosity. It was a pattern, one I had built with my own hands. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of that realization settle. The past was laid out in front of me, line by line, paid in full. And the future, whatever it was, would have to look different. 1 month passed without a real apology, just short messages from him that said things like, "You're taking it too far," or "Can we move on already?" I stopped replying. The space felt necessary, even if it left a bruise behind my ribs. On a quiet Saturday morning, a knock sounded at the front door. When I opened it, my son stood there with a small duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He looked rested, confident, as if nothing between us had cracked. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "Got a minute?" I stepped aside. "What do you need?" He walked in like he owned the room, glancing around the lake house. "Still looks good. You really keep up with this place." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "So, we were thinking," he began cautiously, "maybe we could stay a weekend, if that's all right. Just a few days. She's been stressed. And this place is perfect. Thought we could stay here next weekend." It was said lightly, with the same tone he'd used as a kid when asking for $20 for the movies. No hesitation, no awareness of the wound still open between us. I stared at him. "You want to use the lake house?" "Yeah," he smiled. Relieved I understood. "I mean, it's always been kind of a family spot, right? And you're not using it much lately. So, is that fine?" The audacity pressed against my chest, sharp and cold. You didn't think we needed to talk about the wedding first. He blinked. Mom, don't start that again. This is just a simple request. No drama. I felt the shift, then the clarity settling in like a stone. He truly believed I would bend again, the way I always had. I folded my hands slowly. I haven't said yes. He froze when he heard my words, like the air between us had shifted without warning. What do you mean you haven't said yes? He asked, a sharp edge creeping into his voice. I mean exactly that, I said. You asked a question. I haven't agreed. He let out a short, irritated laugh. Mom, come on. It's just a weekend. You're making this weird. I'm not making it anything, I replied. I'm telling you I haven't decided. His brows pulled together. Why wouldn't you let us stay here? You always do things like this. You turn small stuff into big stuff for years. I said quietly. I've done whatever you asked. I've helped with bills, covered emergencies, co-signed loans. I've shown up every time. He rolled his eyes. And you're bringing that up now. Seriously. You asked to use my home. I said, I'm allowed to think before answering. No, he snapped. You're punishing me. This is about the wedding. You're being dramatic again. I felt my hands tighten at my sides. You got married without telling me. That wasn't small. That wasn't simple. You don't understand, he said quickly. We didn't want pressure. You get emotional about things. We thought it'd be easier that way, for who I asked. He went silent. I took a breath that felt steadier than any I'd taken in months. I'm not ignoring what happened, and I'm not pretending it didn't hurt. His voice rose. So that's it. You're saying no. The room felt still. Waiting. I need time to think, I said. I'm not sure the lake house can be used right now. His mouth fell open. Shock. Then offense. I understand. Mom, I just hoped it would be different. I've done more than one simple thing, I said. I've done enough to fill years. He stepped back, shaking his head. You're choosing to make this ugly. I'm choosing boundaries. I answered, for the first time. He grabbed his duffel bag, anger simmering under his skin. Fine, he said, if that's how you want it. He walked out without looking at me. The door clicked shut, soft but final, and I stood in the center of the quiet room, uncertain whether I had just lost my son or begun to find myself. For a week, the house stayed quiet. I didn't hear from him, and I didn't reach out. I thought the distance might settle something inside me, but instead, it made space for a different kind of ache, one that didn't ask to be fixed. Then the calls started. The first one came early in the morning. Mom, he said, breath tight. Do you have a minute? I kept my voice steady. What's going on? There was an issue with the car payment, he said. The bank called my wife. It's a mistake, I think. I didn't reply right away. I heard him exhale sharply. Look, I'm dealing with it. Things are a little messy. In the following days, he called intermittently, each time explaining the challenges he and his wife faced. Mom, I'm trying. All right, I'm doing what I can. I folded laundry as he spoke. The phone on speaker. I know. He hesitated. You didn't have to say no. Yes, I said gently. I did. For a moment, he didn't breathe. You're different. He whispered. I'm learning, I answered. In the pause that followed, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not understanding, but the first crack in the story he'd told himself for years that I'd always be the one to step in, soften the edges, and catch whatever slipped through his fingers. He spoke again, quieter. I don't know how to do this without you. I didn't fill the silence for him this time. I didn't hear from him for several days after that last call. The quiet didn't hurt the way it used to. It felt like a space finally clearing, a room finally opening. One morning, Marcy knocked on my door, holding 2 cups of tea. You're up early, she said with a smile. I'm learning how to be. I answered. We sat at the table while I sorted a small stack of papers, insurance forms, repair notes, a list of projects I wanted to start. For once, none of it felt like a burden. It felt like ownership. You're handling things differently lately, Marcy said gently. I'm handling myself differently, I replied. Later that afternoon, my son sent a short message. I'm trying to figure things out. I'll give you space. I'm not angry. I read it twice, then placed the phone down without replying. Some things needed time. Some things needed distance. I stepped outside, letting the air settle around me. The dock creaked lightly when I walked onto it, the same sound it had made the day I bought the place. Back then, I didn't know I'd be standing here decades later, learning how to build a life that belonged entirely to me. The lake didn't answer, but it held me in a way nothing else had. If you've ever had to choose yourself, even when it hurt, hit like, leave a comment or subscribe. I'd love to know you're out there.